the ability of the individual to live compatibly with himself. Punishment, his inability to do so. Thus the higher or devachanic sphere is that in which the individual begins to experience the consolation of the intrinsic good which he has expressed upon the level of desire. He therefore begins to understand the meaning of the concept of the Buddhist transmutation of passion into compassion. He begins to realize why, from the beginning of time, the great teachers, the great scholars, the great moralists, the world's saviors, the great lawgivers, have set up codes of conduct through the following of which man is said to serve God or to serve good, and therefore to gain a certain right to internal and eternal happiness. In the devachanic part of the emotional body, or the higher part of the KAMARU PA, therefore, we have this sphere of the unfoldment and expression of positive desire. The entire tonality of the integration changes. The individual begins to feel himself in a desirable and a beautiful situation in relation to his own nature. The visions, dreams, or experiences which are the symbolic expressions of himself are now appropriately clarified. They are benign. They are constructive. He finds himself not with tormentors, but with friends. And what he, of course, does not know is that these friends are the extension symbolically of his own friendliness. That those around him who are thoughtful are the extensions of his own thoughtfulness. And that those who forgive him his mistakes are the extensions of his own instinct to forgive others. Everything with which he is associated that is now fine is something that he has already inevitably and instinctively discovered to be fine through the experience of his own living. Thus he may be said to sort of enter a promised land. He may be said to be rewarded. He is simply rewarded because of what he is, even as he is punished because of what he is. Always now, of course, on the level of emotion only. So the emotional positivity of things is expressed through sublimity, through the emotional experience of adoration, through the veneration of things that are good, through the simple and very human, quiet enjoyment of that internal contentment which is the sign of integration. The individual who can live with himself will have a reasonably happy time on that part of the after-death plane which we call devachan. Now, as he moves upward, it is the same person, because in each instance, in this body of ours, this composite body, of which the desire emotional body is one part, the records of the various levels of the activities of one individual are inevitably there, simply because they are the thing that caused the action, and they are the consequence of the action itself. So each human being, having a concatenation of emotional qualities, ascends gradually in consciousness from the lowest to the highest. And the individual who experiences the blessings and peace of devachan is the same one who previously went through the less happy circumstances of kamaloka. Having exhausted as far as is possible the negative aspect of life, the individual gradually seems to awaken. He begins to sense values. The illusions begin to die in him because he has re-experienced them so intensely that little by little he has that type of thing which is called illumination or enlightenment, especially in the sense of the Zen, the Buddhistic school of Japan. In Zen, no one is presumed to be able to convey the meaning of enlightenment. It can be known only to the individual to whom it happens. And in the process of the struggle through Kamaloka, there is a kind of awakening. Some people have it in this life. They, according to Plato, it is quite possible to go through a good deal of Kamaloka while you are alive. Because the moment you begin to attack emotional excess in yourself and understand through it, you begin to break down its power. And if it cannot control you here, it will not control you hereafter. If you can master it here, you do not have to face it. But for one who masters it, there are 9 who succumb to it, because they do not even recognize the importance of mastery. They do not realize that in the experience in Kamaloka that a greater need exists for integration than even here on the physical plane. But in any event, the experience of gradually awaking seems to occur also in the Kamarupic bodies. And the being moving through from the lower to the higher parts of this vehicle begins to function through the positive emotions which he may possess. We have assumed and we know that very few persons are completely bad and very few are wholly good. Therefore, everyone has a certain degree of these experiences, punishments and rewards, according to his own nature, according to his instincts. And as his actions arise from these subtle instincts within him, the so-called punishment for an action is not punishment for what happened. It was punishment for the instinct which caused it to happen. The same is true of the reward. Perhaps the instinct was never able to express itself adequately on the material level. But if it was there as a factual, constructive force, it also is intensified and released in the Devachanic experience. So man passes through this body, growing up in it, through the miseries of Kamaloka, and into the maturity and into the quietude of Devachan, if he has earned the right to it. And having ascended through these spheres, he becomes more or less completely aware of his own psychic, emotional entity. Now the Kamaloka problem is, of course, intimately associated with the Christian concept of the soul, because this is exactly where this chemistry is taking place. What man terms soul is really the regenerated Kamarupic sheath. It is the entire emotion structure of man regenerated through the experiences of rebirth and purified constantly by the cycle of experience in Kamaloka. Thus man builds soul, which in turn becomes a luminous vehicle for him as he perfects its intangibles, until it becomes truly like the golden wedding garment of St. Paul, a wonderful vestment like the robes of glory of the high priest of Israel. So this invisible robe of glory is in reality being created or woven by the interchange of desires, positive and negative, in the constant life of the individual. This in turn brings us to the problem from a psychological standpoint. We know that in the Jungian system, for instance, we have the guardian and the shadow. We have the problem of the positive and negative poles of the psychic nature. The psychic nature is almost completely devachanic, or in its structure and in its function, because it is the root of volition. And volition is this pressing into activity of the various purposes of the individual. Let us consider then for a moment, try to diagram this a little bit, and assume now that we have a picture or a vision in our minds of the appearance of the Kamarupic sheath during life. It is egg-shaped, with the large end of the egg down. It surrounds the body and places it as in an alchemical bottle, or as the old Rosicrucian mystic said, as in a glass or crystal. The normal and natural color of this sheath, when seen by extrasensory perception, is a kind of iridescent opaline appearance. It is luminous. It is mostly of pearly type of color with rose and blue, and has much of the opalescence that we see in certain stones. It is, of course, something utterly indescribable in terms of anything that we have seen, but this is approximately. This might be said to be the emotional body in complete repose, while it is doing nothing and is not contaminated. The moment, however, that emotion begins to move within the individual, it begins to cause an excitation in the field or contents of this globe. This globe surrounds the physical body and is associated with it by a whole series of magnetic fields and cords, which attach themselves to various parts of the body. Particularly, however, the major attachment, like an umbilicus, is to the liver. However, the emotional body attaches wherever there are certain types of cell structure and wherever there are certain magnetic cores within the body. It forms the basis of this sympathy. Now, in the course, for instance, of getting good and angry over something, you see the emotional vehicle gradually change color. It changes its tonalities and becomes what we would term unpleasantly colored. We notice also that wherever positive emotion is expressed, creative emotion, you have pure color. Wherever negative emotions are expressed, you have impure color. Now, these emotional pressures do not immediately contaminate this field. For you can be angry of a Monday, and 3 years later you can be angry again, and there seems to be no particular effect. The anger expresses itself, the field becomes murky, then after a little while the anger subsides, the individual has a good dose of repentance, we find the colors changing, we find the reds and browns giving place to greens and blues, and the individual is out of his immediate pressure. If, however, there is a continuous pressure of some kind of a negative nature, which we might term an habitual pressure, or a habit that is taking over the person, or that wonderful instinct to nag that has gotten out of hand, or a perpetual addiction to the gratification of selfishness, these continuous, repeated procedures begin to form structures within the structure itself of the KAMARU PA. These structures will endure during the intensity of an explosion or an example of themselves, will then slowly decrease in intensity, but will not entirely vanish, and a little later will be revitalized with another powerful expression of the same intensity. And this will keep on and on and on until gradually these structures take on powerful psychic forms. They become either geometrical or in one way symbolical, or they may even take on mysterious forms such as are seen in archaic symbolism and allegory. These forms may take on the elementary appearance of monsters and things of that nature, and such forms usually frightful, sometimes highly symbolical, like the appearance of a giant gradually manifesting within this body. These forms will impinge themselves in sleep upon the individual and will cause the positive psychological dreams that can be analyzed. Now, these forms can be and often are dissipated as they are fashioned. the moment they lose energy supply. The moment the vibration that created them no longer sustains them, they begin to fail. And in time, they can be again completely absorbed if the energy which sustained them is permanently deflected from them. They can also, under certain conditions, be changed by a rapid alternation or alteration of energy. The old mesmerists found this out, but more to the point, perhaps, is the idea that we have seen or heard about in the cures of disease achieved at sacred places like the Shrine of Lourdes or the Shrine of Saint Anne de Beaupré in Canada. Here, a tremendous and absolute expression of faith, a complete, unconditioned expression of faith, has suddenly, apparently, produced a miraculous result. It means that a complete and tremendous catharsis of the KAMARU PA has been accomplished by throwing into it a highly spiritualized vibration. It has broken these patterns. It has broken the forms which were being built by habit mechanisms of a negative nature. Paracelsus and many of the other earliest physicians were convinced that these forms arising within the KAMARU PA are the real and constant cause of dangerous physical ailments. That because of them, and because of their direct impingement upon the physical body through the bloodstream, that they are the greatest and most malignant cause of toxin. And that if these vibrations are allowed to go uncorrected in the form of negative or evil emotion patterns, that they will ultimately result in the appearance of chronic diseases, often malignancies, in the flesh of the individual. And that grief and sorrow and hate do become the source of disease. Paracelsus was also of the opinion that these emotion entities are the cause of dangerous bacteria, and that bacteria and germs, so-called, are actually creations from the emotional excess of mankind, and that if human beings were not subject to evil thoughts and evil desires, that these creatures would not exist. That may or may not be true. We are not dogmatizing on it, but there is every reason to know that man does create by the intensities of his emotions and thoughts. The sphere of his creations we are not too well acquainted with, but that all intensity, that any vibration set in motion becomes an internal force in the universe, is difficult to categorically deny. In any event, regardless of whether the germs floating around have such an origin, we know that there are germs of death in man himself that are originating in the desire material of his nature. And that the cleansing and purification of this is very important to him. That it is part of the alchemical mystery of transmutation. For the desire body, or the KAMARU PA, is the alchemical vessel in which the base metals of the seven senses must be transmuted into the gold of the universal medicine. So we have all these elements involved in the story of the KAMARU PA. Also we know that according to the Indian mystic, in sleep, this is the sphere or plane to which the individual retires. He retires into the KAMARU PA. Now, there are many stories and accounts as to what he does there. Some of them are highly symbolical, and this is one of the points where the various schools are not in agreement. But one thing they do acknowledge is that in this state, man is constantly conscious, even while asleep. And why he believes himself to be unconscious is because that the impressions are not brought through into the physical brain. Actually, the individual, we'll say psychologically speaking, dreams at all times when he is asleep. but his dreams are not remembered or not brought to his conscious awareness unless their intensities are abnormal or the circumstances causing them are so archetypal that it becomes essential to him. The more common form of dream, of course, arises from some inconvenience of the body in which complete relaxation or the complete retirement of the entity into the KAMARU is not possible. There we have him tossing about, still with the power of motion, which means that the desire body is still attached to the physical. We find him groaning and grunting, which is further indication of the same thing. And then we find a semi-dream state, in which perhaps he awakens with a nightmare or something of that nature, all of which proves that through one reason or another the physical body has not been able to attain the relaxation which it required. Therefore certain functions are still in operation. Now remember that the KAMARU PA is also the source of motion. Therefore it must be and is the source of function within the body itself. It is very closely associated, therefore, with all derangements of functions, and therefore with what we commonly term functional ailments. The most immediate expressions of kamic unrest in the psychic life will therefore be various minor derangements of function. Today, for example, our humanity, particularly so-called Western civilized man, is more burdened with functional ailments than ever before in recorded history. His digestive difficulties, his insomnia, his minor heart ailments, all of these represent functional disorders due to psychic stress. Wherever, however, a functional derangement is not corrected, or the cause is not removed, or the symptoms merely blocked by medication, the pressure continues. And if the pressure continues long enough, there will be destruction of structure. And the moment there is this kind of activity, then we move into the organic field, and we have the individual set with some perhaps incurable ailment, resulting in general modification of structure and its attendant inability to function adequately. Thus, disease or dis-ease, as we know the word today, is essentially associated with kama, or desire. And as disaster means only an ill star, and it is definitely associated with the astral or starlight, or with the devas, the shinas, who were the stars. Now these stars are the psychic vortices within the kamarupic body itself. And these are the ones whose immediate influence is most directly felt upon the psychic life at all times. We also then have to go on a little to the study of the effect of devachan upon the consciousness of the person. We know, for instance, that in Buddhism, the individual must achieve final liberation by the attainment of the complete sublimation of personal existence. That there can be no desire without personal existence. Without desire, there can be no illusion. Without illusion, there can be no birth or rebirth, and no sequence of the nidanas. Without illusion, the individual cannot do wrong. Without illusion, man cannot break a universal law, or try to. Illusion, therefore, is the root of all things which have to do with pain, or with disaster, or with sorrow. We also know that even the most beautiful and sublimated of human emotions are still subject to a kind of pain, and that it is very difficult to divide frequently between love and pain, between even the most unselfish desire and the burdens which it carries with it and within it. Thus, there must be, in order to sustain man, certain illusions which are called constructive or essentially good. And this relates essentially to one important factor, why man has a kamarupic nature in the first place. Because kamarupa, or the kamic body, is the source of motion. It is essentially the source of qualitative motion. And our most general term for constructive qualitative motion is progress. In other words, what is progress but a human being dreaming ahead of himself? Progress begins always with someone's hope, someone's vision, someone's desire. Progress is man attempting to attain the substance of things hoped for. Progress is the individual envisioning a future greater than now. Progress is also the individual seeking desperately to create a situation in which he can be secure. It is happiness. The individuals, many of them have told me that they live for tomorrow because today is no good. Of course, as long as they live that way, tomorrow will be no better, but they haven't found that out. But we all have certain hope in the future of things. And we are not inclined to take the prosaic attitude that future is nothing more or less than the extension of our own conduct into the unknown. We do not favor that thinking. So we do have auras of color, which enable us to bear great burdens. The love of our children causes us to overlook their innumerable faults and makes it possible for us to make tremendous sacrifices for them. The love of our world may make us give our lives in the service of our fellow men, always because we have dreams and because we have hopes. And so patriots of one generation fight and die for a freedom that their descendants promptly give away. They will not live to see their dreams shattered any more than they will live to see their dreams come true. Thus there is a kind of dreaming that is a dreaming forward, an extension of something within us beyond ourselves, and then the desperate effort to bring the rest up to it and to make a new stand on a higher level of achievement. There are also dreams that approach very close to man's spiritual emergency. Man, in his emotion and visualization, envisions heaven, the nature of God, the love of God. He yearns for reunion with God, and his yearning is a desire. He longs to go home to the great and wonderful peace which, according to Buddha, rests at the end of the desert of waiting. These are his dreams, these are his hopes, these are his desires. And these in turn have moved him, have given us the saviors and the sages of mankind. Because every savior is someone who saw in man more than was obvious. If he had not seen it, he could not have gone on. Sometimes he imagined too much, and therefore taught too much, and the world never understood him. But he was still struggling on, believing in things, and believing is a kind of emotion. So our hopes, our faiths, our believings, our willingness to invest in the unknown for the common good, our most simple and personal contact with spirit as a feeling of goodness or a feeling of hope, all these things are part of desire. And because of these kind of desires, man is constantly moving toward the conquest of desire. For the ends of desire, these very ends he seeks, are only possible when evil desire ceases and only good desire remains. And as we try to analyze more and more about good desire, we see the strenuousness of this emotion gradually diminishing until the greatest desire of all is just the simple desire to be for reality itself. The simple longing for union with the eternal, which is the last desire of which man is capable and the highest. So in this whole sphere of man's psychic life, we have this motion through the great sphere of desire activity. And the desire activity of man is perhaps the greatest integrity that he has, if he can use it. It is far older than thought, and in many ways far wiser. And yet, because of his inability as yet to integrate its powers, man must pass through this period of disciplining. And this disciplining is, of course, represented in the great rituals of the old mysteries. For all these rituals, with their fantasies, their pageantries, their dramas, are stories of man's motion through the illusion of desire. Here he must fight evil monsters. Here he must be variously tempted and tried and tested. And only when he has passed through all these ordeals successfully, with his mind fixed firmly and totally upon truth, has he been able to achieve the mastery of the rites or rituals with which he has been associated. Incidentally also, this desire principle has to do with the concept of the world soul. Kama is, of course, not only desire in the profane sense, it is also love. Kama represents the emotional nature of universal being or deity itself. Therefore, man's experience is one on the level of emotion. Man learns mentally. Man acts physically, but man experiences only emotionally. And as experience is the most important thing in the world, it becomes essentially true that this desire sphere is one of the most important parts of man's nature. For by means of desire and the desire body, man is capable of achieving that experience which enables him to say, I know. Now, he may not be entirely correct when he says it, but he is still in the peculiar position of being able to accept on the grounds of a certain valid, undeniable testimony that has arisen within himself, which cannot be defended necessarily to others, nor can it be taken away from him by anyone else. For that which is experienced cannot be assailed by theory, doctrine, or dogma. It remains as a strangely internal validity. Thus, volition, as kamic motion, gradually is transformed into validity, which is kamic acceptance on a strange kind of complete inner proof. This proof cannot be achieved by the mind, but the mind in turn may be to a measure indoctrinated with it. And where this experience has occurred, the mind then becomes motivated by this experience of truth within the individual. Thus it is on the level of desire only that the human being is capable of the experience of identity. He can theorize on it. He can know that it is possible. He can experience it only on the level of desire, but he cannot attain it there. When I mean experience, therefore, I mean this. I mean that by intensity of emotional feeling or desire, man may, for example, have the apperception by experience of the fact of union with God. This desire does not achieve the union, nor is this experience a proof of the ultimate union. Plotinus, the Neoplatonist, tells us that in his contemplations and reveries, in his great spiritual exaltation or ecstasy, which is practically the summit of the emotional arc, that on 2 occasions he was lifted up into union with the blessed God. Now, this union lasted only a second, only an instant. But like the Havelock Ellis's account of the mystical experience in his Dance of Life, These moments transcended all possible knowledge, all possible learning, and established an experienced fact within both Plotinus and Ellis that could never be shaken by any material pressure of any kind. Yet neither of these persons achieved what Buddha called the Mahaparinirvana. They did not enter into this union. They were not absorbed into it. They were not forever one with being. They apperceived it. They experienced it as Moses, standing upon the hill of Moab, looked out into the promised land but did not enter. He knew of the land by some strange power within his own nature. And the reason in the ancient Kabbalah that he was able to know the land was because God had given to him the Matrona as a bride. And the Matrona in the old Kabbalistic system was the power of the divine soul, or the presence of the mystery of God as the Shekinah, given inwardly to Moses. This, in the Eastern philosophy, parallels the idea that the purified KAMARU PA becomes, so to say, the Beatrice who must lead Dante into the Paradiso, who must carry him onward into the greater worlds that lie beyond. She is the blessed damoiselle of Dante Gabriel Rossetti also, and the wonderful being sung by the troubadours. She represented the purified KAMARU PA, or the power by which man may glimpse, through perfected and regenerated desire, the absolute love of God. So this vehicle becomes, through constant evolutionary process, gradually into a magnificent instrument who achieves for man the great end which must be attained. The KAMARU PA is therefore, in its devachanic aspect, or in its Sukravati, it is the city of the gods. It is the temple. It is the mysterious assembly of the wise. It is the ecclesia, the sanctuary. For it is in here that all the skandhas, or powers of the personality, unite in worship for the Pentecostal experience. It is very interesting, therefore, that we should find it represented in the Apocalypse of St. John as the bride, the holy city, the bride of the Lamb, Jerusalem adorned as a bride. It represents, of course, the psychic soul nature, which finally becomes the instrument by which, through the tremendous experience of unselfish love, man approaches the mystery of universal reality. So the transmutation and evolution of this body through the ages produces the adept self, produces part of the mystery of the final hermetic marriage of the sun and moon. And the KAMARU PA is actually, in this marriage, the moon. And the unfolded mental nature, ascended and united to the Buddhic sheath, becomes the sun. And the union of the sun and moon is the symbol of the God being. For it is through the union of the sun and moon that the great mystery of equilibrium is achieved, which is the nirvana, or the cessation of all action. Not negatively, but positively. The soul, then, is man's new body. And when man has finished with his evolution as a physical being, he will have another great cycle of evolution in the KAMARUPIC sheath. He will then find the development of his entire psychic nature on a level much higher than that which he knows today. He is building, consequently, a kind of embryo of a body that he will later use. And when the time comes for him to use this body, he will have it available. And he will be more or less like the city that is adorned as a bride, because this body is his own soul, or his own radiant vestment, that must be purified and redeemed, and must find its way ultimately to enlightenment. The story of this, incidentally, is magnificently set forth in the Bible in a book that very few people ever bother to read, the book of Ruth. And if you will study it carefully, you will see why it was that Ruth became a gleaner in the fields of Boaz. And why? Because she took no more than her part. Why ultimately the lands and the fields were given to her. And the story of the soul, which is a stranger from Moab, who becomes converted to the true faith, and then finds all these things happen, is simply the story of the soul. And Ruth represents, therefore, the soul's journey, which is the journey of the KAMARU PA. And today psychology is concerned almost totally with this field. And this is one of the limitations which we think must ultimately be overcome. Namely, that as yet, psychology is a science because it is dealing with bodies, whether they be physical bodies or emotional bodies or mental bodies. But the great philosophies and the great religions of the world must deal with the being within the bodies. Not only the being within the physical body, but that which is behind the mind and behind the emotions. In other words, the entity itself and its relationship to eternity. Sukhalati, or Buddha's paradise to come, is therefore a place of rewards. It is not the ultimate, but it is the place where good rules, and good comes before perfection. And perfection is that ultimate state in which all of these bodies are resolved back into the principles that cause them. Every individual, incidentally, must realize that the KAMARU PA, or his own emotional body, is not only channeled into his physical body through these connections which we have mentioned, particularly the bloodstream, but that in another direction, the KAMARU PA itself, or the emotional sheath, is channeled into the great emotional energy field of the planet. Now the Hindus tell us, therefore, that the planet has a kind of purgatory, and that this purgatory is the result of the kamic pressure of all beings possessing kamic natures, and that all of their emotions, feelings, desires, passions, and intensities flow into the kamic substance of the planet. And that therefore, in this kamic substance, we have a constantly building toxin, very similar to the idea of the local smog. For just as the pollution of the material atmosphere may produce a dangerous situation, so the gradual pollution of the kamic sheath of the earth through the kamic intensities of creatures with desire may result in the creation of a strange field of psychic toxin. This psychic toxin, if it is unable to purify itself because of its amount or the mass of pollution which it must sustain, is therefore not available. This psychic material is not available in proper quality for the reforming of astral or psychic bodies. And entities who must build new bodies from this material must build it as though with a bad heredity. They must build it from a polluted source. Consequently, according to the ancient Hindu beliefs, certain methods, certain means were used to bring about the cleansing of the KAMARU PA. We have, for example, told you of the idea of what a great faith could do at Lourdes in breaking the kamic pattern of an individual. And in the Hindu philosophy, the KAMARU PA of the earth is purified by a tremendous psychic experience in the emotional field of the planet. And this is accomplished by an avatar, or the appearance of a deity. Therefore, Krishna says, when virtue fails upon the earth, then I come forth. And now virtue being, of course, an emotional quality, a positive, constructive emotion. Whenever the Vedas or the laws are lost in the darkness, Vishnu takes form and rescues them and destroys the monster that is attempting to devour them. And of course this monster is believed or symbolically intended to represent the mystery of the astral light, or the mystery of the devouring negative emotion field, which is being constantly built up by human perversion. A great example of the perversion is war, in which millions of human beings are brought into this terrible catastrophe and are lured beyond their emotional capacities by the selfishness which, of course, incidentally, has to be in themselves. But nevertheless, they do not know this and are therefore subjected to these pressures, which they should be able to handle, but they cannot. Therefore, whenever this emergency is said to arise, the Hindus believe that an avatar appeared. Now, we have already mentioned the idea that the channel of this kamic material is always called blood. Therefore, we have the story of Golgotha and the cleansing blood, and the power of Christ to break the kamic envelope of the earth. These legends we find in the Rosicrucian mystical writings of the medieval and early periods, and incidentally among the Gnostics, and reference will be found to it in some of the writings of Philo-Judaeus, one of the earliest mystics to interpret some of these ancient passages. But always this idea of the appearance of the Avatar, or the appearance of the Messiah, and the power of the cleansing blood, the means of breaking the patterns by which individuals gradually lock themselves. The same thing happens with the individual who sincerely gains the spiritual consolation of a great belief. He then finds that the cleansing of the KAMARU PA begins in himself. Faith and fear cannot live together. Light and darkness cannot dwell in the same house. And where the light in man, the light of faith, of beauty, of love, of hope, and of truth, gains intensity, we find the shadows in the KAMARU PA gradually fading out. The psychologist knows this is true. Carl Jung has said that without religion, persons past middle life will seldom be cured of their psychological difficulties. The reason that religion is able to accomplish certain of these things, or sublimity of any kind, or spiritual conviction or great aspiration within the individual, is that they set up new vibratory vortices that are completely contrary to the negative patterns which have produced the difficulty. And under the pressure of these new, tremendously intensified vibrations, the old forms are shattered, and we see the ancient picture like we see on the wall of the Sistine Chapel in Rome, where in the great symbol of the Last Judgment we see the heroic figure of Christ standing in the midst, and around and below him the falling demons going in all directions. Here is the statement, of course, which would be almost identical to that of the Hindus, namely the concept of enlightened love breaking up the emotion demons in the KAMARU PA. So all of these things work together. They are all stories and symbols. St. George slaying the dragon, all of the dragon slayers represent essentially man breaking the kamic pattern. And until he is able to break this pattern of his negative desires, he cannot use the great substance of Kama for the purpose for which it was intended. For out of this same substance that is now poisoning him is to be fashioned in the mysterious vessel of his own soul, the symbol of the sacred Eucharist. But actually, the KAMARU PA is not only symbolically the cup of poison that was given to Socrates, but it is the Holy Grail and the symbol of the ever-flowing blood, the sangre real, the blood of the King. These mysteries of the cleansing blood always therefore tie into the KAMARU PA. Systems of healing built upon the analysis of the blood and the study of the blood structure also will ultimately point the way to the mysterious energy that is conveyed in it. So man loves and hates, hopes and fears, builds and destroys because he has blood. When he does it enthusiastically enough, we call him red-blooded. But what actually it tells us is that these things are the pressures of his own soul, the pressures of his own psyche, and that until he is able to bring this soul into union with his purpose, until he is able to put the golden collar on the unicorn, he will never understand the power of the soul as an instrument of release, nor will he realize the tremendous benediction of beauty and of all the great arts and great music and great books and all these things that have come from the soul longings of mankind. And so this soul, dark in its one face and light in the other, this twofold mystery, one of selfishness and the other of sublimity, this is man's challenge. And it is here that the great work of human evolution has to be carried on. For it is the peculiar and mysterious duty of man at this stage in his karmic evolution to redeem his own soul. And he does so by regenerating the great field of desire and transforming it into the living sanctuary or place of holiness unto the Lord. Well, I think that's the subject for this evening.
What's up, guys? We are just still going to continue racehorsing all these seesawing thoughts of the merry-go-round, the carousel of the island mound and the pier and the porch and the lighthouse and the rocks and the fence and the pool and the tide and the wool and the hair and the crown and the Virgo and the Berenice Brown and the comatose girls and the Abraxas upon frowned and the catty consort of the Asclepius serpent and the Uranus the art and the epiglottis that hurt in singing the tear-stained notes of a story of love that has been turned into jokes.
Oh, just to let you know. Good times.
I can't say I've thought about my epiglottis for quite a long time, but
I'm going to look this up now. Epiglottis. What are you talking about?
we're talking about the little dangly thing in the back of your throat, right?
Is that the speed bag?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. It's the speed
talking
bag
about,
that,
right?
that swells
Okay.
up when you get tonsillitis.
So that thing is also interesting, like symbolically. What do you think it means? Considering that our anatomy and our astronomy are mirrors to each other, as our geography is, this fractality of nature. What does it mean with the function of the epiglottis, the speed bag dangling in the back of your mouth, as you put it, that it protects the airways from getting your respiratory system from getting food in it? Theoretically, that's why that little dangly guy is there, is so that air goes in the air hole and food goes into the food hole.
And do you know why you have to breathe through your nose? It's because in the cavity of your nose, it treats the air for your lungs. So it puts the humidity into it. It's the water. So everything is alchemy. All right, so you have all these different elements, and when you have the air coming in, it has to mix with the water before it enters the lungs, or else it causes a dysfunction. And the mouth is not really capable of doing that job. It's the nose that does it. So that's why they say when you meditate or when you want to go into altered states, you have to breathe into each different nostril And if you breathe really fast and bring a lot of oxygen in, your circulatory system is going to go nuts. You're going to open up your vascular system, have circulation. When you lower that breathing, you enter almost instantly into the alpha state of consciousness. So if you learn how to master your breath through your nose, you master states of body consciousness.
Syrinx in classical Greek mythology was an Arcadian nymph and follower of Artemis, known for her chastity. Being pursued by Pan, she fled into the river Ladon. A feeling 5-gallon Philip here is about to comment with the rest of the myth.
Oh my gosh. That is literally like so funny. Because I literally like, I don't know what it is, but like I've always attracted very Capricorn-y guys. It's probably my Neptune that had to like see all of this bullshit. And they would always have this very like, no, I don't do that bottom thing. Like just making me feel so dirty, you know. But I would want to submit to them because I like saw them so like as, oh my gosh. And I'm not like renouncing sexuality or telling anybody to renounce their sexuality. I'm just saying like, learn what works for you. Like this, like they are saying, it's all alchemy, right? Like to me, having the type of memory that I have and the type of sensitivity that I have now, I just like, I can't frictionate myself with every type of vibration and then have like a cognitive dissonance as to like, what were they carrying, what were they like possessed by, and all of these things, because all these words now suddenly become these different altars and demons. It's literally like 16 minutes past 5 in the morning, and my parents are still not back from the hospital. I was kind of like meant to wake my brother in the case that they sent me a message that they have been helped. But South African hospitals, oh my gosh. Just like hospitals in general, when you don't have money. Not that we don't have money, but like it's just not feasible to go to a private doctor every time my dad needs treatment for his breathing. So it's very interesting, like even what they are telling about like mixing the air and the moisture. It's all vying back to this, because we saw Taurus as the bell clear voice and the belt and the milk and the nourishing part of the Prakriti that became the pacified Rohini cart, a la paint your wagons in all the registers and colors of a high note on your chart, you know. It's really like, I am so, I want to describe it forever, because it's like it is this like, I don't know, it's like it's talking from the foreverness of this one train of thought, that it's like it can't be disconnected from anything else, even the parts that you want to like run away from and like put into like all sorts of neatly cast archetypal shadows around in the cave, and the crystalline gems like their flittering light behaves, and the carrot of the sticks and the Karen of the Picatrix, and everything that they are saying, it just makes me feel bewitched. But I love it because I know God and the Keykeeper is one, and it's not this unholy spirit or a divine androgen, and it's not these demons and the things that they have been scaring you with. It is the star of your luminous chi that the soul churning wheel has spoke, and the pictures of the scripts that the songbirds now supreme lyrically wrote in the notes that they scream. The banshee of the owl Minerva wisdom is still. The meditation rings bells that the cow was the mill.
Galen Phillip here is about to comment with the rest of the myth. I like our chat is awesome.
Yeah.
In these streams, they've got so much to add.
The river. Oh my God, I have like a whole chapter in the new book about the river.
Oh, that was what I was just reading and taking notes about before we got on the stream. Right? About all of the sculptures of certain gods that have like a syncretic correspondence to each other. Osiris, Neph, Krishna being depicted as black, or like...
They literally just said the stream, and then like Slick like pointed to chants like that thing we talked about. It was so funny now. And it just made me think of that picture now, and I'm just like, are they like telling me that they're like talking about like just the exposure of what Kiki's channel has been? Because I can't see like who my subscribers are. I can see Scorpio Oxman, and I can see I can see subscribers that I've had chats to, who've responded to comments and so on, that the like YouTube update in the studio little version gives me outside of YouTube or that app. But it's just so like bizarre that it's so fascinatingly whirling to my dream that I wanted to be, and I'm like this magical kid seeing like I created like some sort of like addition to this dream, and it's not just selling fake eyes to be creamed.
The river. Oh my God, I have like a whole chapter in the new book about the river.
Oh, that was what I was just reading and taking notes about before we got on the stream. Right? About all of the sculptures of certain gods that have like a syncretic correspondence to each other. Osiris, Neph, Krishna being depicted as black, or like carved out of black marble or some kind of dark blue potentially. And how all the other words for the Nile.
Our Rashad Jamal archetypal stream on the world consciousness stage of the Stag Castrati scene. Right now it's just like double speaking into this Hermione dream of the hymen and the naus and the noose, of the lucid scream of the knowing, the penetration of all but a dream, and the rowing of the boat, and the nightmare of the skin, and the mar of the hair, and the lupus that ran away, and the rohini as a serpent the soma remained unpacified.
River in other languages would call it by, all signified black, and an Indian word for black is Nilo. So long story short, there's very strong reason to believe that the river was associated with, or, back to the waters thing, you need the waters mixing with the air properly, crossing into each other, that the river itself, the Nile itself, was considered a physical representation of the deity in the tradition. And that there's a potential too, and I don't know where my receipts are on this, but I know I've come across this, that one of the earliest potentially cross uses where it was to mark the points of the annual inundation of the Nile.
Mm.
And so that inundation was crucial to life, which would make sense that they would correspond their deity that's their savior and preserver of life with the river.
Could I jump in on that?
Definitely.
All right. What they say, or what they say is that when the soil is black, that's when life comes back. All right. So Osiris is the fertility of the land. It's the bringing back of the waters of the Nile. So what you have the opposite, which is the desert, which is red. You have the red sands is death. So you have black, which is life, red, which is death. All right, so you have these two different color symbologies. Now, if you go to Samaria or the Akkadian statues and art, you'll see the tree of life, and you'll see these gods like Shemesh, or these other gods like the Anunnaki holding buckets of water, and their arm is down holding the bucket, and then one arm is up with a pine cone, right, or a seed. And everybody's like, okay, what does this mean? Well, the tree of life, these are the gods of fertility, by the way. So basically, they're carrying the waters of life in the bucket because the basins fill during this time of the year. And then, so you have the element of water, and that's why their arm is down to the ground holding the bucket, because it's the basins, the water flows down.
That is just so interesting, like what I've heard about Maga, the rat yoni, everything Persephone, underworld, everything sex, everything Leo, yin, and mermaid spirit that reflects our Venus and Mercury, that the Neptune through the Pluto of the sphere refracts the 9361, the zero dimensionally begets.
And then the next arm is up in the air holding the seed. And if you go at that time of the year, when the start of the spring, it's when all the trees, the pine trees, the coniferous trees, they pollinate the air. It's really bad for allergies because the whole air fills with pollen. So you have the two elements of life. You have the air, which carries the seed, and the water that puts it in the fertile soil to create the tree of life, or feed and maintain the tree of life on earth. So there's a lot of misconceptions, and it gets really crazy into conspiracy land of what these symbols are, but it's so basic when you really think about it.
Yeah, am I coming through?
Yep.
Awesome. I think that's the first time I've heard that those are buckets for water. I've always heard more extravagant, kind of far out theories about what they're actually holding and things like that, because sometimes they kind of look like little purses or something, like little bags or something like that, right? But that bucket, that does make a lot of sense for sure. Real quick, I just wanted to mention regarding the nostrils, as you're talking about this, I was reminded of Gemini, the two nostrils. Gemini sometimes
Oh my god, I literally have the biggest nostrils. I am so self-conscious about it in pictures because, like, if I tilt my face down, you see the mega shade of phone. If I tilt my face up, you see the Moon, Venus, Neptune, Capricorn, blurry horn, and it's like you can see my asymmetry, and you can see just like this entire like I feel like you can see my story in my face, like with everybody, but like yeah, I just like it's a better story when you know them. You know what I mean? Because otherwise it will only be what you can project onto them based on what you know about yourself to be true and the reflections of yourself that you will weave through them. So yeah, it's just like it's so interesting like how all these things kind of like sync up in this. Like I can't even like fake it. You know, if you've been keying in to our channel, you will see that like we try to do these things. Like sometimes I like get a little sleep deprived because I try to like use things as they come to me in that way, you know? Like it's like I can't ride the wave of the thought and then like just have it like blow my mind. Like it's like I want to have something physical to represent it as well. And it's just been part of like just like me through the Saturn in the 5th in Aries, everything that is supposed to be, and Bharani, you know, through the Pisces of the Revati. It's like I need to use all my tools to kind of like creatively paint screenshots that art the kingdom outside of me as a representation that assimilates a roadmap of meaning back to deciphering me, you know, because when you will meet me, it will be like this. I still need to unfurl to who I'm talking to, right? It's not just like, it's like all gonna be there, but it's not gonna be in like that one slice. And I think that's what my son in the 7th house needed to learn, to be fair, because it was like, I can't just like belt these L's all the time, right? Like, it's just not. And I'm not saying don't be a perfectionist or don't do this, but it's just like for me, I just like I want to have a moment to enjoy life and not feel like burdened by the knowledge of what it could all mean for my soul and like for my whole and just like for my afterlife and for my DNA memory. Like it's just like it gets so bizarre, guys, that like it's like you can't even live now because you have to like correct all these different alters and universes of your timeline, and it's just like you have to like compress it all into a choice now and just be like, from here on out now, that has been seen, that has been heard, and now I am creating in the image and likeness for which my willpower and strive and my virtue was stirred, because what it became wasn't what it has been, and yet it was always what you should have seen.
People correspond it with the breath, right? The two lungs. And then as you're saying the air and water kind of connection, it came to mind that Gemini, their feet are dangling in the Milky Way galaxy. And so sometimes the Gemini twins have been depicted as their feet kind of hanging out in the waters, hanging out in a river or a stream or something like that. And so it's kind of just a curious connection with all the things that you brought up.
That is interesting because all the Jupiter nakshatras have like a singular pada into the water signs. Punarvasu has that pada that he was just describing, and Vishaka has that one pada into Scorpio. So it's like that. It's that my moon that is tiptoeing in the galactic central waters, cosmic Oceanus waters. And yeah, the other one for me would be the Jupiter in Purva Bhadrapada, which is also that Ajaikapad. And everything that we've been speaking of, these covenants and these altars and these dragon fire chiefs speak of serpents of the deep with sirening mermaid songs of harmonic muse, sick to the mirrors of the owls of the castrated Nereid, the Prakriti of Mu, from the Aditi Vasu, a pun in word and world has split.
That I kind of see this Gemini correspondence with that, but I love that stream of thought that you had with all of that. I thought that was great.
Of course, Bacchus, similar to the German word for stream, Bach. Another fun one.
I'm always talking about the brook here outside of my house, and like the Bacchus, Dionysus, cornucopian metaphors that through slick descendants, Dionysian, Neptune 3, like just, I know his cipher is always evolving. I'm just speaking from like the points of reference that got me clued into like, well, what are people saying? Why is it like these different things? Why is it like Chiron for Virgo? Why is it Vulcan? Why is it the moon? Why is it Cupera or X for Taurus? Why is it Pluto exalting in Leo or in Pisces? Like, you know, the fact that these answers were like never consistent anywhere. So I was just like trying to do my own deciphering as well, and then I tried to do it like this syncretist process as to like what I'm learning alongside all of these people who I've been looking up to and who are now going to be forming a bedrock channel to my channel, like, you know, drawing the water from the rock in this sense, because yeah, it's like, you know, you were very fluid as a child. You became very solid in your castrati Jedi hook of physicality, Saturn like gaze of the child, you know, that he begrudgingly gave. But the child was so fair. I am Isis' eldest daughter, a seer.
I wanted to throw into the mix on it too, is that the Greek word for the 365-day solar year is Nilos. So, you know, that 365-day cycle that the Nile River has is crucially important. And where I read that, they also stated that that word in the Greek gematria equaled 365, but I haven't gone in, you know.
So that is Solin. And we've been just seeing all these soul in Mercury's barren Hasta, because yeah, and all the set desert rose of the Phrygia song, the Tantra mermaid spirits and the cults of fertility around all of that, right? What they have also been saying now. And that's why I'm saying, like, I know it can sound so heavy or sexual or fetishized or hierophiliac or all these things, but it's because I had to come at it from all those different angles to kind of like blow my mind into all the nuclei and just nuclear lies that it's like it's always been there, even the way I've never been able to actually like recognize a deep fake filter until my sister told me about it, and then I couldn't unsee it. The same with the transvestigation of like the Mr. E thread that just brought all of this energy back to Uranus and everything that I felt so tainted about my Jupiter debilitated in Capricorn. cornice. It was just everything that the Punarvasu Beauty and the Beast video of Clay Nakti sang syncretically as a chorus.
Yeah,
Verified that.
you know, I dig that. CON in English is a 365. So all things congruent.
That's so funny because I was mentioning like how they made my Son article congruent to like a larger assimilation of a story that was true, but like it was like a fractal of the truth within a bigger holistic truth, from which I felt like this cut out of observing myself as that schism to like the seashell of the everything else, because it was like I didn't know like what was being done to the images of the catechism, you know what I mean? Because you always own it as memories and you can't throw it away, and then they tell you it's a sin and that you should pray or you'll fail, and then nowhere you can hide because your mind is where it stayed and the body is what remembers, so you dismembered and dismayed, and the trauma goes on and they cut you in half and they lure you back to the sun under the divine and the giants, and it's so bizarre. And to me it's just like, how is it so deep? And why is there so much subtlety to the connections that makes it so deep, when people are just gonna like umbrella the fact that like you conspired, you draw inspirations, you channel demons, you looked at a grimoire, you connected words unorthodoxly, like you were a blackguard, you were like literally the blackguard. The fact that I was like being like a blackguard for black people, in like the notion of like I can empathize with the Nelson Mandela effect of situations like wanting ideals to represent certain things and just seeing the struggle repeat every day still around you. So yeah, it's multifractal, and it's all this, all, and it's unity music, and it's syncretism beyond a spiraling peak. It's just, it just is right now, guys, and I'm so glad that I can tap into these things and just like I don't have to worry about editing, I don't have to worry about pictures, I don't have to worry about anything. Like that Occultist Lux library, check out the link if any one of you guys want to create your own content and like add to these conversations. Please do. Like that Occultist Lux library, it like had like literally almost 16 gigs of just PDFs and video clips and audio clips of all these esoteric informations, and it's very organized, so everything has its folder, you can work through it systematically. You know, it was just like so like a Virgo representation of my Mars needing to go, because like I wished my phone looked like that, like the way that zip compressed folder looked, you know, everything in its folder, everything in its categorization, everything part 1, then part 2, then everything like that. Like, it's this process. Like, I'm decluttering my phone, I'm trying, like, I watch the videos that I remember things were taught to me, and I try to bring that back. I try to post the videos. That's like my new kind of like just the channels that I've been watching, me tuning into their latest things. Those would be like my Netflix and chill vibes that I post in like the community offerings, because I want all of this communion to happen, and I don't want it to be this underworld dark psy-opted legally siphoning word waves of just causing all sorts of waves. Like I actually lost a subscriber and then I regained a subscriber, and I lost the subscriber again and then I regained a subscriber, and I'm just like, oh, is it gonna yo-yo like that? You're gonna feel like, what did I do? Did I like, yeah, like, because it's just like I will never know what I will need to improve on until I can have like a honest self-reflection on it. And even in terms of improving things, it's not even about like I thought I was gonna constantly have to go back and delete stuff and like re-upload it or re-edit it or recreate the names, but it's like this alchemical process of also showing you like that's what the they that we have been outsourcing through our I has been doing. So it's like trusting the process and just like stereoscopically, spirotonally, like use your Canva app, use whatever apps you have on your phone that can make a video, like, and this is so me literally like getting into the just the fact that I'm getting into the notion that I want to just it's like I don't want to hold anything back or like sit on any information or something like that, like if it can help anybody, like that's what I want it to be more than anything, as my clarification process to myself, like don't let it be this roadmap to you, don't let it be this I don't know what eidolon to you, just tune in and reflect. That's all. Like I also think like I want to like don't reflect me, like I feel like my words are sounding so double speak like a cult leader, and like constantly not trying to like tap into that Plutonian energies that I do have, like I've seen my influence, I've seen the fact that I can bring so many people together under one idea, and then if I'm not the upholding of that idea, it's that same story of like the king was deformed or the king was maimed, and like in the righteous sense, like those stories held so much ancestral wisdom, but in this inverted sense, this transhumanistic sense, it's like every time a king or a queen or a great is like sacrificed on this world stage, we all see the trial of everything that they had to like go through and the shit they had to take. So yeah, it makes it like feel like, wow, was it even worth it to have that gift when you had to like pay it right back, right? But I think making it worth having the gift for us who aren't in a system of churning money out of people's hopes and dreams, aspiring to be something that you tell them they can be, but they will never see. The notes that you hit or go to your extremes because, you know, the representation you represent is just a cascade of meaning, and everybody's able to, like, that's why I think, like, we've been talking also about like 12 house planets and like world stage nakshatras that become these quote unquote cup bearers or light bearers or yeah, like the water and the light, and it's just like always coming back to this, like, what was first thing, and then like I'm so over that. Like, I know it's a riddle that like we all need to solve, but even that Saul in the V brings out a whole nother story again. What is this? Intellectualization results from block childhood trauma. That's me. Ugh, this YouTube feed, guys. The psychological basis of magic, synchronicity, Carl Jung's summary on Noose 1 month ago. Polyrhythm experiment called Stellar Flow. Serene animations and calm, lucid rhythms, streamed 3 weeks ago. Jordan B. Peterson, I have been convinced of the existence of the devil, and here he has the set character with his donkey Paimon. Satan said loyalist, back to the slick harkening back to that ugly duckling beak thing. Let me take a picture of this so you guys can see the vibrant that I've been watching and like what's on my screen right now. The Cult of the Black Cube. I was diagnosed with polycythemia because of narcissistic abuse. I don't know that word, so I'm gonna download that video now, because whenever I don't know a word, I just love to have something to explore. Like, I love asking questions. I love the quest. I love the... Like, I just love the journey of finding the answer, right? And I just think they got under my skin for a while there, because it was like, I thought I found the answer, but no one believed me, or I'm never gonna find the answer because it's not real and it's all projections and tech and mirrors and aliens that you see, and it's us but they're not like us, and it's this and it's that, and it's like all fucked up. Literally, guys. I'm trying to find a video that was just in my climb, like I'm in my feed, and it, my climb and my feed, and my feet. And I just like, I don't know where it is now. Delete files. My storage is almost full. See, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I need to stop being such an information whore. And just like delete the videos that I made for today's work. And because I already posted those. Yeah. So yeah, like I don't. Oh, there it is. Jesus prostitutes from Lady Babylon. That's what I was gonna like react to next. But it's like I can't download it, so I like saved it to what I want to save it to watch later. Because I see a very kind of like homunculi looking spirit thing, a very going back into the matrix of mother thing. It's Wednesday night. Bible studies with Dr. D.C. Ammon Hillman. More boys. It's just so funny, and like there's a car in the bottom that's blue. And then it says in the shorts, when Oprah gagged Mariah, CA, ... Jesus Christ explaining himself, ... Like, why are all these Punarvas being so sexual? Ugh, I just saw like my thoughts. Oh my gosh, I need to share this video, the law of vibration. Thoughts. When art imitates you, V and W, O in